Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm bringing you guys a brand new track review video. We're going to talk about several recently released songs I happened to hear and wanted to talk about. So, yeah, you guys know the deal at this point. Let's just get right into things with the first song I want to talk about here today, this new track from the 1975, People. For those of you that have been watching my channel for a while, you probably know that I'm not really all that crazy about the 1975 or anything. I don't hate them, but I don't really care for them that much either. So I wasn't really sure what to expect from this new track of theirs, considering it's like, I believe the first full song that they're dropping from their new upcoming record, you know, outside of like that first track thing they dropped a couple weeks back that really wasn't, you know, a song or whatever. I'm not going to talk about it in more detail because I already talked about it in one of my past track reviews. Check that out if you want to see my thoughts on that in full. But I wanted to see what the group was going to do with a full-length, you know, real song here on this track. And honestly, they surprised me here in this track, and in a very good way too, because People is a fresh new take on some of the ideas that the band has played around with already in the past, mostly because this song is probably the heaviest track the band has produced thus far, going to the point of being pretty much a punk song. And I don't just mean punk in comparison to what the band has done before in the past, I mean genuinely like a straight up punk song with the really shouty vocals here on this thing, the really thunderous driving guitars as well. And for the most part, I think that the band's incorporation of this style of music into their own works pretty nicely. I know I've been kind of iffy on a lot of the band's genre experimentation in the past, but I think it works really nicely here on this song. I think the anger comes across really genuine here on this track. These shouted vocals that I mentioned earlier sound great as well. I really hope that on this upcoming record maybe we get some more vocals sounding like this, because yeah, they work really nicely, and the instrumental to this track is another thing that I really enjoy as well. Like I said, the really thunderous guitar parts and just this really driving instrumental overall makes for a very aggressive atmosphere that pairs up really nicely with the vocals. Overall, the sound of this song is one that's very unique for the band, something that they haven't done before, but at the same time, it fits in rather nicely with what they've done in the past. Like, I still feel like this is a 1975 track, it's just a new take on it, and it's a new take that I think is performed pretty well. Lyrically, this track sees the band tackling different modern political and social issues, some of the same ideas that the band has brought up on previous projects, or even on that other weird teaser track thing they dropped a couple weeks back. I will say that the lyrics here on this song are probably my least favorite part, not necessarily because I disagree with what the band is saying here, once again because I do, you know, agree to a large extent with most of what they're saying here on this track. It's just that a lot of what they're saying, I feel the presentation of it isn't super interesting or anything like that. I've heard many other bands and artists talk about this same subject matter in more interesting ways when it comes to the lyrics. But overall, this really isn't that big of a problem here on this track, as I feel like the instrumental and the energy and the vocals here more than makes up for some of the, you know, weaker lyrics on this thing. So overall, I think the band did a really good job with the creation of this track. Like I said, I'm not crazy about the 1975 as a whole or anything like that, but I think this new track here is really solid, and I hope we see more of this on their upcoming record. So yeah, if you're a fan of the band, check this out. Even if you're not a fan and you haven't really been impressed with what the band has done in the past, I would still give this new song a listen, because it might, you know, surprise you. I'm not sure if you'll necessarily like it or not, but it'll at the very least surprise you, I guess. Moving on, the next couple of songs I'm going to be talking about are these two new tracks from Pusha T. I wasn't expecting to get some new material from him so soon. However, with the context behind both of these tracks, I guess it kind of makes sense. The first of the two songs I want to talk about is Sociopath, which features Kash. This track was one that originally was supposed to be on Daytona, his last album that was released last year. However, it was left off, I guess, for whatever reason. And overall, I think this is a pretty solid track. I thought Daytona as a whole was a really solid, enjoyable album, and I think this track would have fit on nicely in the context of that record. In fact, I kind of wish that this track was included on Daytona, as one of my biggest issues with that album was that I felt like it was a bit too short for its own good. I mean, this track isn't particularly long or anything. It really wouldn't have extended the length of Daytona by that much, but still, I think this is a solid track, and it would have been a great addition to that album. I like the really grimy, aggressive beat here on this track, and the way that Pusha T is flowing over it. He just sounds so in sync with this instrumental and what's going on. And later on in the song, when Kash is introduced, she also just meshes really nicely with the sound of this instrumental too. I like the beat to this thing. I like the flows. The lyrics are probably the only part of this track that I'm not super crazy about. Not that they're bad necessarily, they're just a bit typical for Pusha T, I guess. There's not too much to say about this track. It's not a super long song or anything, but if you're a fan of Pusha T, I think you'll definitely enjoy this, especially if you like Daytona, as this is essentially just more of that, considering it literally was made at the same time as all of those songs. Definitely check this one out. The second of the two new Pusha T tracks is Coming Home featuring Miss Lauryn Hill. And overall, this track, I believe, has been kind of floating around for a bit on the internet, like in the form of leaks and things like that, but only now that we've gotten a full, official release of this song. And I think it's a really good song, and I'm happy it did get an official release because there's a lot to really enjoy on this track. I like the really soulful instrumental to this thing. I think it suits Pusha T and Miss Lauryn Hill really nicely. Pusha T's flow on this track is great as well. Lauryn Hill's feature here is nice as well. I think she has great chemistry with Pusha T and the instrumental too. I don't really have many complaints with this track. Once again, it's just another really solid Pusha T song. I'm not sure I would say it's one of his best of all time or anything, but still a pretty great track, and one that if you're a fan of his, you should definitely give a listen to. Moving on, the next track I want to talk about is this new song from Incubus, Into the Summer. Incubus are one of my favorite bands out there. However, I haven't really been all too crazy about the band's more recent output this decade, with the exception of maybe like a few songs here or there. So I was kind of interested to see what they're going to do with this new single for, I guess, their upcoming record. It's going to be released sometime in the near future, I would hope. Overall, though, I don't have a ton to say about this track, unfortunately. I just think, like a lot of the more recent output from this band, it's just a bit lackluster. I mean, it's not awful or anything, however, it just feels like Incubus on autopilot. It's not all too different sounding from like some of the cuts off their last record, to be honest. I still feel like some of the mixing on this track is a bit wonky at times. Like, it's nowhere near as impactful, the mix here, as I feel like it should be. It just doesn't really deliver the weight I was hoping for a track like this to deliver. I will say that the track is decently catchy, but Incubus have penned so many other tracks out there that are more catchy and just more engaging and interesting to listen to on a more general level that I don't really feel all that compelled to return to this song in the future. The lyrics here aren't really anything all that special either, and I do feel like it's kind of odd that they're releasing a song called Into the Summer in, late August when we're moving towards the end of the summer. I mean, maybe for those of you people watching in the Southern Hemisphere, this track will be pretty applicable in a few weeks' time, but I don't know, I just feel like it's a bit of a missed opportunity. I mean, this track isn't terrible or anything, it's listenable to be sure, but as a big fan of these guys, I'm a little disappointed yet again that it seems like this next upcoming record of theirs, if it's more like this, is going to be another kind of mediocre release. Who knows, maybe I'll be proven wrong on that, and I do kind of hope that I will be, but yeah, that's all there is really for me to say about that track. Moving on, the next song I want to talk about is this new track from Alter Bridge, Take the Crown. I don't have a ton to say about this song either, because kind of like the Incubus song I was just talking about, I feel like this song is a bit forgettable and uninteresting, all things considered. I feel like all the performances across this track are pretty solid, everything comes together nicely enough in the construction department of things, but I just feel like this track really isn't all that memorable. None of the riffs are really all that stand out, really just none of the instrumentals, more generally speaking, are all that stand out. The vocals are pretty, solid. I think Miles Kennedy's a great singer. I've said that multiple times in the past, and this track isn't really much of an exception to that. However, it's not one of his more standout moments as a vocalist, and the hook of this track really isn't all that, memorable or catchy or anything, which is a bit disappointing because I feel like big, catchy hooks is something that Alter Bridge does really well, and this is something I pointed out as being a high point on the last single the band dropped a few weeks back, and I can't say the same thing with this new track here. Overall, I would mostly recommend this song to hardcore Alter Bridge fans, because, outside of that group of people, I'm not sure this track will do a whole ton for you personally. Moving on, though, the next song I want to talk about is this new track from Vince Staples, So What? This is a song that apparently is tied to his new TV show series. I have not seen that yet, so I can't really comment on this song in the context of that. I could really only talk about it as a song on its own, and overall I think it's a pretty average cut from Vince. I don't really think it's all that memorable for him, but it's not, a pain to listen to or anything like that either. pretty much every aspect of this track just ends up being a bit too typical for me personally. The instrumental's pretty trap influenced and just isn't really all that standout from a lot of other instrumentals I could hear nowadays. Vince's flow and delivery on this track, while certainly energetic, just doesn't really stand out aside from that. And the lyrics here on this track really aren't anything super interesting or stand out either. I don't know, I don't really have a ton to say about this song outside of that. It's just a bit too typical for me to really get into and enjoy all that much. I mean, if you're a hardcore Vince Staples fan, definitely give this a listen, but if you're not, I mean, unless it just sounds like it's right up your alley with how I described it previously, I wouldn't check it out. And moving on, the final song I want to talk about here today is this new mashup of the Blink-182 track, What's My Age Again, with the Lil Wayne song, Milli. And this is a song that I've seen getting a ton of hate online over the past few days since it's been released, and I kind of came into it expecting to not like it as a result of that, because this seemed like an idea that was kind of iffy to begin with. I know the two are touring currently together, but still, it just seemed like an odd idea. But after giving this thing a good few listens, I mean, I don't care for it really, but I don't really get the hate either. Essentially what you have here in this track is the What's My Age Again song with the verses taken out and replaced with verses from Milli instead. And when it starts up, it doesn't really sound all too terrible. Lil Wayne actually pairs up pretty nicely, I feel, with the instrumental from What's My Age Again. Sure, it does sound a bit odd hearing the two things mashed up, considering that they're completely different genres from completely different time periods as well. However, I think that's kind of the interesting thing about mashups, is that they can pull really odd things together and make it work. However, as you move into the hook of this track, I think the song becomes a bit less interesting, as it's essentially just the hook from the original What's My Age Again track. The only thing is that it's a bit less powerful this time around, as Tom DeLonge's vocals that appear in the background of the original track have been removed here on this new mashup, probably because he's no longer with Blink-182. It does make sense for that to be the case. However, I didn't really miss his vocals being there until I heard this new version of the track here, because Mark's vocals on their own, while they don't necessarily sound bad, they don't just have the same power and force to them that the original track's vocals had, with Tom doing the background vocals as well. I know it's a really small thing to complain about, and it honestly doesn't really get in the way that much of my enjoyment of this song. It's just, it does make the hook of this thing a bit less impactful. Really, my biggest problem with this track is just that it's not a super interesting or exciting mashup. I mean, the idea to have these two songs come together into one is kind of interesting, because they're, you know, different genres from different times, as I said before, and they do have some crossover with each other that works, because like I said before, the start of this track with Lil Wayne's verse and the instrumental, they pair up pretty nicely. It's just that essentially all you're getting here, as I also said previously, is the original What's My Age Again track with some Lil Wayne verses added in too. It's not a super exciting or interesting mashup. It's pretty basic. The combining of these two songs, while an interesting idea on its own, the way it's done here just feels really low effort, and it kind of just seems like something that was slapped together because, like I said before, the two artists are on tour together, and I'm sure that releasing this is going to bring attention to that tour, and that these two artists, you know, still exist, are still doing stuff, and will make people talk about it for one reason or another. Overall, you know, I don't really have much of a strong opinion towards this track. Overall, I wouldn't say I care for it all that much. I probably won't be revisiting it because, like I said, it's not super interesting or anything, but I still don't really get a ton of the hate behind this crossover. Is it just because it's Blink-182 and Lil Wayne together crossing over? Is that the only reason why? Because, I don't know, I think it's kind of interesting on its own, at least in concept. It's just the execution is a bit too boring for me to really care about. But overall, I mean, if you're a fan of either of these artists and you're looking for something that's a bit different and out there, it's not a terrible thing to give a listen to, but, you know, don't expect to be blown away or anything. And with that said, that concludes today's track reviews. I hope you guys enjoyed what I covered here today. If you happen to have opinions different than my own on any of these songs, that's perfectly fine. In fact, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, make sure you also leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more music-related content, things like more track reviews, album reviews, things of that sort. One other thing I'd like you to leave in the comment section down below is your thoughts on my new setup back here. I know I mentioned it in my video from a few days back, but I'm currently in a new setting, which is going to be the new setting for a good while now. So if you guys, my viewers, have any input as to if you think this background is good or if it's bad, or if you'd like me to try something new, feel free to leave it in the comment section down below. Or if you have any other, you know, criticisms, advice, input, anything like that about the video, leave it in the comment section as well. So yeah, once again, thank you guys, and stay golden.